Hello again. If you joined us the last time, you heard me talking about Bill Clinton's presidency, some of the laws that came out during his time as president, and some of the ways that they were received. Today, what I want to do is I want to talk about the culture of the 1990s, and in many ways, you're going to see that it's a contested culture. A lot of this goes back to some of the issues that we were talking about in the counterculture movement and some of the things that were coming out of the mid to late 1970s from conservative voters. A lot of that is encompassed in these culture wars of the 1990s. But to give you a good example as to who and what I mean, take a look at that PowerPoint right there. That gentleman that's got the microphone in front of him is a guy who actually has run for president of the United States before. That's Patrick Buchanan. Okay, Buchanan was a very conservative White House aide under the Nixon administration. And in the early 1990s, he sounded the alarm that America was under invasion. Now, of course, he didn't mean like literally we were being invaded. He meant that there were immigrants that were coming into the country in unprecedented numbers. And these immigrants were coming from places that, shall we say, were of diverse origins. Now, let me make something clear. We've seen this before. This isn't anything new. We've talked about it in the context of this class. These new immigrants are coming from places throughout the Caribbean, they're coming from South Asia, they're coming from East Asia, and they're bringing their culture with them. Okay, this is going to spark a movement for quote unquote traditional American values. Now, once again, it's nothing that we haven't seen before. If you recall from the 1920s, the Ku Klux Klan reinvents itself. It reinvents itself not in the South, but in the North, because that's where many of these immigrants, Italians, Jews, Russians, Poles, that at the time they were thought to be a threat to American traditional values, and that's part of the explanations for why you see a reformation of the Ku Klux Klan. All the things that immigrants have been blamed for in our class, we see them blamed for once again. They're blamed for a lack of jobs. They're blamed for bringing crime and other forms of vice. And ultimately, this nativist backlash is sort of gonna crescendo in the late 80s, early 1990s. Very good example as to what I'm talking about would be Proposition 63. What Proposition 63 proposed was making English the official state language of California. And if you think about California, especially if you think about this in the context of early American history, that's kind of ironic considering at one point in time, California was part of northern Mexico. We got California by conquering California. Now, this is one of several different examples of people trying to hammer out exactly what is American culture, who is American. It's a fight for the soul of America's cultural future. It doesn't end there. Race and crime had been big issues, big political issues, really since the 1960s. If you think back to what we were talking about in the context of those urban rebellions of the 1960s, Los Angeles burning down, Detroit burning down, and political commentators at the time said, yes, this is really bad, the radicalization of the civil rights movement, that's a problem. But at the end of the day, we haven't taken care of things like generational poverty. We haven't taken care about things like institutionalized racism on police forces. Now, not to all, but to many American voters, what this said was we're soft on crime, right? That maybe you have a justified reason for being upset, maybe not, but at the end of the day, there's no justification for burning, looting, and rioting. Okay. Good example in our current context, the 1990s, would be a motorist by the name of Rodney King. Rodney King was driving through Los Angeles, and when I say driving, I mean sometimes upwards of 90 miles an hour through residential neighborhoods. The LAPD are going to chase him, and when they finally stop him, they're going to pull him out of the car. Now, understand something. Does this guy need to be pulled over doing 90? Absolutely no question about that. That's not what this is about. But what happens after they get him out of the car is going to be the subject of much controversy. You've got four white police officers all surrounding King that all have these long batons, almost like baseball bats. And they're using those to just whack Rodney King again and again and again, kick him, pin him down, right? It's a brutal beating, and all of it is captured on videotape, right? This camcorder recording goes viral. News organization after news organization plays it again and again and again. And while it was not unbeknownst to the American public the long, infamous history of the Los Angeles Police Department when it comes to racism, this was shocking even by those standards. All four of those white police officers are going to go on trial for excessive use of force, and all four of them are going to walk. They will beat the case. The all-white jury, or mostly white jury, will acquit them and do so relatively quickly. And what's going to happen in the aftermath of this acquittal is going to be rioting in Los Angeles. In 1992, Los Angeles will burn in what will become the most destructive riot in American history to date. Los Angeles would replace Detroit as the most destructive riot in American history. Resembles those urban rebellions that we were talking about, considering Los Angeles, or at least that part of Los Angeles, there weren't many diverse races there. It was predominantly African American. This is not a race riot. Now, at the same time, um, this is going to be on everyone's mind when that guy at the bottom of the screen down there, O.J. Simpson, goes on trial for allegedly murdering his estranged wife and her, not really a friend, it was a waiter that happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, Ron Goldman. Everybody's talking about these LA riots. Everybody's asking themselves, if OJ is convicted, will we see, Rodney King riot 2.0? OJ is going to hire a legal dream team. He was a former NFL superstar. He was a Hollywood star. He was a very rich individual, in addition to being an African American accused of killing two white people. This is taking place in Los Angeles, and what this legal dream team is going to do is really going to come after the racism of the LAPD. They're going to accuse the police force of mishandling evidence. They're going to accuse the police force of trying to doctor up evidence to frame O.J. Simpson. And the crowning moment is going to be when the prosecution makes O.J. Try on this bloody glove that was found at the scene of the crime. It was a leather glove, and if you know what happens to leather when you expose it to moisture, it shrank. And O.J. was having the time of his life getting that on, and it clearly didn't fit. And again, if you're looking at the PowerPoint at the bottom of the screen, that man in the blue suit, the African American man standing next to O.J., that's Johnny Cochran, and he rested his case to the mostly black jury in Los Angeles. If the glove don't fit, then you must acquit. And they did, even though many people in the white community considered O.J. Simpson to be very guilty. Many people in the black community considered him to be very innocent and simply another example of a black man being set up by an institutionally racist organization like the LAPD. And so in any case, guys, what you're going to see here is deep and profound divisions in American life when it comes to race. Now, I know you know that there's other elements to race as well. And I also know that the Republicans are going to do quite well for themselves throughout the 1990s. The 1994 midterm election is a sweeping Republican wave. Even though they lost the presidency, they didn't do too bad for themselves in 1996. And one of the things that the Republican Party is really coming after in this contract with America is the way that we've structured welfare recipients in the context of people that need some help making ends meet. One of the things that this Republican Congress is going to implement is welfare reform to the tune that you've got 5 years. 5 years to find yourself a job, 5 years to get employment, and after 5 years, your government benefits will go away. Well, that sounds like a long time, and in ways it is a long time. But there's certain other things that it simply doesn't take into consideration. Number one, do you have time to retrain yourself to compete in a late 20th century economy? Do you have time to go to places like community colleges or four-year universities to have a degree that will help you get a better job? If you have kids, how do you balance that with with going to school and probably working too? There's a lot of unanswered questions that this reform simply doesn't have any answer to. Long story short, there's not a lot of funding for childcare, job training, things that are going to help these people transition in that 5 years from somebody on welfare relief to somebody that's a productive member of the American economy. And when a lot of these people get thrown off of assistance, many of them are absorbed into what Ronald Reagan called the service industry. I call it the fast food industry, right? Now, obviously, your CPA performs a service. Truth be told, I perform a service. But the bottom line is, you need a lot more workers at McDonald's and Taco Bell and Subway than you do at the university or the college levels, right? In any case, this fast food industry boom, you're going to see Taco Bell's going up on every street corner. Same thing goes with McDonald's. What they need is an army of workers that will, help them serve their product. And that's where a lot of these individuals are going to end up, are going to land. Is that employment? Yes, it is. It absolutely is. Is it employment that's going to adequately be able to support a family? Probably not, right? But understand something. This whole idea of we've kicked this New Deal mentality of the government micromanages our economy is a very profound and important part of the political culture by the late 1990s. It even prompted Bill Clinton, president at that time, to proclaim the era of big government is over. We no longer need these big government programs that move the economy in one direction or another. If you just look that people are getting jobs and they're moving forward, which is true, but not the entirety of the truth. We don't need these government programs anymore. I want to move in a different direction, a darker direction of the culture wars of the 1990s, and talk a little bit about the emergence of the very suspicious citizenry. Last time we met, I told you that one group that had no love lost for Bill Clinton was the National Rifle Association, who, as they geared up for both the 1994 and 1996 elections, promised the American people that these Democratic politicians like Bill Clinton were coming after your guns, and if they got into office, then the Second Amendment was very much in jeopardy. This relates to a case in Central Texas involving a religious group calling themselves Branch Davidian. In Waco, Texas, a guy by the name of Vernon Howell, who would later rename himself David Koresh, it sounds much more biblical, had taken over the religious group known as Branch Davidian. This group practiced a very strict form of Christianity, and they lived in a compound out on the outskirts of Waco, all by themselves. It really was kind of reminiscent of some of those religious utopian societies that you saw retreating into the wilderness in the 1830s and 40s. People like Mother Ann Lee and the Shakers, maybe even to a greater degree Joseph Smith and the Mormons. Okay, but in any case, they're very secluded, and they're having more than 2 or 3 worship services per day. Were they a little bit different? Sure. Were they a little bit eccentric? Probably. But at the surface level, they're not really hurting anything or anyone, right? They're not hurting anyone. Um, until it comes to be found that the leader, David Koresh, is stockpiling weapons. Now, these weapons are not illegal on surface value. They're being doctored up to basically become assault rifles, which was clear violations of Clinton's Brady bill and his gun control measures. That gets the attention of the government. And the other thing that gets the attention, the word on the inside is Koresh is marrying, if you understand what I mean. He's marrying young girls as young as 13 years of age to older men. Okay? And in the state of Texas, what you call that, whether she consents or not, is statutory rape. And so they've got him on these gun charges as well as these statutory rape charges. And what the government is going to do is the alcohol, firearm, and tobacco branch of the government is going to serve him with a warrant for his arrest. Only they don't just knock on the door and be very polite. They run at the compound, waving the warrant in one hand and waving an M16 in the other, right? I don't know about you, but if I was David Koresh, I'd batten down the hatchet, which is exactly what he does. What happens is a gunfire, firefight between the government and Branch Davidian. It is going to be a fight where both sides are going to sustain casualties. David Koresh himself was injured in this exchange. What will happen thereafter is, first of all, a ceasefire, and second of all, a line of negotiation between Koresh and the government. And what Koresh is very concerned about is that he does not want to go to prison. He knows that basically he's facing charges that involve child molestation, and he knows how child molesters are treated in prisons, right? Ultimately, those negotiations are going to break down, and the government is going to get the idea that what they just need to do is storm the compound. They do using tanks. Now, understand something. It should be scary enough that the government's using weapons on its own people. It should be very, very scary that they're using an actual tank to storm this compound. At that point, Koresh knows that it's over, and he just makes this determination: you are not going to take me alive. He ordered fires to be lit inside the compound, and Waco burns. It's a tragedy. Branch Davidian more or less does not survive. There's only a handful of survivors that we have to this day. Maybe more importantly than what's going on with Koresh is the way that this looks from the outside looking in. One individual that was on hand watching Waco burn that afternoon in 1993 was a former military man by the name of Timothy McVeigh. Okay? While in the military, McVeigh had begun to cultivate some relationships with people with very clear-cut anti-government attitudes. When he gets out, he starts hanging out with these people like Terry Nichols and members of the Michigan militia. Okay? These are people that are not only very, very much in favor of preserving the Second Amendment, they're also convinced that the government is this evil organization that's trying to take over the world. It goes so much further than taking their guns as far as they're concerned. And to people like McVeigh and the people that he hung out with, this example involving Waco was a very good example, in a bad way, of the government just trying to move forward and erode people's rights. They're going to proclaim that people in Waco weren't hurting anything or anyone. They were practicing their religion, which is a perfectly protected right under the Bill of Rights. What McVeigh and people that are in his orbit are going to do is they're going to pick a federal building at random, literally go into the phone directory book and pick a federal building with a federal address. It happened to be in Oklahoma City, and in 1994, 1 year to the day of the Waco tragedy, they're going to detonate that bomb in Oklahoma City. If you're looking at the PowerPoint presentation, you're looking at the bottom of the screen there, that building that's missing its face, that's the building that McVeigh is going to blow up. To make a long story short, McVeigh is arrested, and after he is arrested, it's pretty clear that he had done this deed. The government's going to try him, and he will be convicted of murder on just dozens and dozens of accounts. McVeigh would later give an interview to a very small rural newspaper, and in it, what he would say is that he considered himself a hero. He didn't consider himself to be, a criminal or a murderer or anything like that. What he was doing is he was sending a clear-cut message to the government. You either stop doing this, you stop doing what you're doing, or things like this are going to happen again and again. He actually went so far as to compare himself to Harry Truman and the decision to drop the atomic bomb. Japan, either you surrender or you're going to sacrifice Japanese city after city. Okay? So this is what I mean when it comes to a deeply divided citizenry, a citizenry that's convinced itself that the government is the bad guy and they're coming for their rights. Speaking of rights, we continue to see the religious right organize and bring more people into politics. I told you in one of our earlier lectures that the religious right was around, conservative voters existed, but what's really bringing them back is what they're referring to as radicalized feminists, right? These women that are protesting and demanding roles in American life, realms of American life that are basically men's roles as far as the biblical definition of the Bible is concerned. Okay? We know that the Roe versus Wade decision is really reawakening this group of Americans and bringing them back into politics in ways that have really never been seen before. And in the 1980s, you do begin to see some erosion of women's rights. You do begin to see a bit of a backtrack in terms of where the feminists were in the mid to late 1970s. This time around, what the religious right is going to do is they're going to point to Bill Clinton as a very vivid example of the degeneration of American culture. His affair with Monica Lewinsky, his lying under oath, all of these things were very vivid examples of the moral decay and rot that America was in by the 1990s. And many of them are saying we need to be much more careful with respect to who we're giving this power and authority to in the context of the government. At the same time, though, you do see a reorganization of the feminist movement. You see the National Organization of Women expand its membership and begin to push back. A lot of people consider what's going on in the 1990s to be sort of a last stand, if you will, of your feminist variety. The 1980s was such a blindside, did not see that coming, that people were just so shocked that what was happening, they didn't really have time to organize to stand up against it. By the 1990s, they had recircled, redoubled their efforts, and they begin to move forward, especially when it comes to protecting a woman's right to choose what happens to her body. This Roe versus Wade decision and abortion is going to be an issue that will be hotly contested, and even in our current contemporary era, right, the 21st century, we still come after and hotly debate these issues. Okay. I also know that by studying people like Harvey Milk, America's first openly gay politician, we know that the LGBT community had organized for its own rights and began to put a lot of pressure on the government to make them first-class citizens. One of the ways that they're pushing the government to do exactly that is by allowing gays, lesbians, and transgendered Americans to serve in the military. Bill Clinton, as you should know by now, has a pretty liberal social agenda. And so when this pressure is applied to allow gays, lesbians, and transgendered Americans to serve, it's something that he takes very serious. It's also a really difficult sell considering the circumstances of American political culture at the time. What they got was a lukewarm referendum on service in the military. What we got was a policy that became known as don't ask, don't tell. If you happen to be homosexual, don't advertise it. And if you happen to be a commanding officer, don't go asking around, right? It's a step forward in the sense that we're not actively screening gays, lesbians, and transgenders out any longer, but it's not a situation where you can say, listen, I am a proud homosexual, don't care who knows it, and I'm also a captain in the Air Force, right? It's not that simple, okay? And speaking of not that simple, you're going to see religious conservatives mobilize to defend what they consider to be maybe one of the most sacred institutions in all of American life. And of course, I'm talking about marriage. What they will propose in 1996 is going to become known as the Defense of Marriage Act. And what DOMA, for short, is going to do is it's going to define the institution of marriage as between one man and one woman, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. What DOMA is basically going to do is make this up to the states. In Massachusetts, California, Texas, Illinois, you guys get to decide on your own what constitutes marriage. But as far as the federal government is concerned, there is no such thing as same-sex marriage. It doesn't exist. What that's going to do is it's going to complicate things at the state level. If you started out in Massachusetts, in other words, you're a couple in Massachusetts, and same-sex marriage is fine and legal in Massachusetts, and then you head on down to Alabama for a job or something like that, and it's not legal in Alabama, what DOMA is basically doing is it says that Alabama does not have to respect that marriage that was legalized in Massachusetts. And the problem with that is there's all kinds of political rights that accompany marriage. The idea of healthcare insurance being probably the most easy to understand example. But something as simple as your husband or wife is in a car accident and you want to go visit them in the hospital, and the hospital administrator says, "I'm sorry, but only blood relatives can go back there." Well, if same-sex marriage is not legal in that part of the country, they're not going to let you back there. And so that's the big issue when it comes to this Defense of Marriage Act. Okay. The bottom line is, by the late 1990s, there's a lot of very important unanswered questions that, frankly, we just don't have answers for. There's a lot of social questions, as I've just got done explaining. There's a lot of economic questions. Certainly, there's a lot of political questions. And probably the biggest thing that I want to emphasize is that there really isn't any dominant political party. It's not like the 1930s, right? It's not Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal coalition, okay? It's also, to be fair, it's not like Ronald Reagan's 1980s. The Republican Party was very clearly dominant throughout that decade. That's not going to be the case in the 1990s. Uh, you do have conservatives and Republicans that have done very well for themselves, but you have a president that's a Democrat. And all of these things are going to set the stage for a political showdown in the election of 2000. And you'll see what I mean the next time we meet.